Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg. With me today is Mary Boergers, not my predecessor in the Senate, but my predecessor's predecessor, a role model, a mentor, and a friend. And she's here today to join me for Kibbitzing with Kagan. Mary, it's great to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Sure. No, I'm delighted and love to do this.
Thank you. So, talk about your career. You had such a wonderful journey through education, advocacy, and the House and then the Senate. Why don't you talk us through that briefly?
Well, I started life as a high school teacher at Rockville High School, teaching history and government, something that second part, civics education, unfortunately, has been dropped from most curriculums. Definitely in the Montgomery County Public Schools, they no longer offer it in high school. And I think we've seen the results. We need to get back to civic education. Um, but after I left teaching to raise my two children, I got very active in politics. The first political campaign I worked on was Lanny Davis running for Congress.
Yep.
Went on to work for county executive, state senate, other people running for Congress. And then when a vacancy occurred, I ended up being appointed to the House.
Yep.
Um, Stayed in the House for several years and then went to the Senate.
Wait, wait,
And
wait, wait, wait. You didn't go to the Senate.
well, no,
You defeated our incumbent state senator, Frank Shore.
that is true.
Very proud to be part
um,
of that campaign.
Very unusual in Maryland to be able to defeat an incumbent of your own party.
Yep.
But he and I differed greatly on a lot of issues, including women's rights, being pro-choice,
Yep.
etc.
It was a big win too. That was huge. I remember
It was. It made a big difference. We were able to pass legislation to protect a women's right to choose.
So
And
talk about being a senator back in the 90s.
well, there were not very many of us.
Right.
I think there were maybe 6 or 7. Um, but it was definitely an old boys club. Um, it was not the easiest thing in the world to be taken seriously, especially I was younger than most of the other female senators.
Sure.
And it was a challenge, but I ended up on the Judiciary Committee.
Right.
And after telling President of the Senate, Mike Miller, that was like the only
Last
committee I
choice.
thought I didn't have anything to contribute to.
So
um,
he did that to you, and then he did that to your successor, Jenny Forehand. So I was a little relieved that he did not try doing that to me. He offered it, but I declined in
yeah.
judicial proceedings.
But I loved, I had been in between teaching and being in the House and working on various political campaigns. I was a lobbyist, legislative representative for the National Organization for Women.
Mm-hmm.
And that was shortly after Maryland put the Equal Rights Amendment into the Maryland Constitution. So there were a lot of issues that affected women that I participated in. And in fact, I was the first card carrying feminist elected to the legislature.
Amazing.
Was funny. I ended up on the Ways and Means Committee because the man
Back
that
in
I
the House.
replaced had been there.
Yep.
And when I was introduced, the chairman, there aren't a lot of feminist issues that go to the Ways and Means Committee. So I didn't know that many members did not really know the chair. So he went up to my office, asked for my resume. So he starts introducing me because I'm the only new member, was in the middle of or actually toward the end of a term. And he's, Mary Boergers. And then his voice starts quavering as he hits the legislative coordinator for the National Organization for Women.
That's
And
hilarious.
one of the Republicans throws his hands up and goes, "Oh shit." He's now Judge Raybeck. I think he's still on the bench or
That's
maybe
cool.
retired. But I kind of said, well, I think I need to work on him a bit.
That
We became good friends. He
Right.
was much more conservative than I, but was kind of gives you a flavor of what it was like
Right.
to be there in the 80s.
So going back to President Miller, whom we
Right.
lost recently,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
longest serving Senate president, not just in Maryland history, but in the nation's history. And the Senate
Yeah.
recently paid tribute to him, and he lay in state. It was his legacy was pretty extraordinary. But we
Yeah.
both have our share of stories about Mike. Is there a PG rated story about Mike that you would like to share with folks here? A fond memory, perhaps.
The things I ended up being one of the coordinators in 1992 for President Bill Clinton's campaign in Maryland.
Mhm.
And Mike was a big supporter too.
Yep.
And he went out of his way. You know, I was out of the Senate by 1996 when
Mhm.
Bill Clinton came to the legislature, to the House, although the House and Senate were there,
Yep.
to talk about an education proposal that he was making. And Mike really went out of his way to make sure that I got to that presentation, that I got my picture taken again with President Clinton. And I really, really appreciated that effort.
Nice. And I was in the House in 1996 when President Clinton visited. So that's great. Um, so tell me about a frustration, an issue that you worked on that you just kind of hit a brick wall in the House or the Senate.
Um, Hard to remember. And a friend of mine described me after watching the things that I worked on and said that I was a boulder pusher. The
Hmm.
idea, and I do this during my all aspects of my life, is I look for issues that kind of nobody else is working on
Yes.
and that I think is really important. And then I start pushing it.
Hmm.
Given the power structure, often by the time the legislation gets enacted or the policy gets implemented, somebody else has stepped forward with more power. Um, you know, I've seen that happen numerous times
Right.
to many women. And so that I think overall would be the biggest frustration,
Yeah.
is that you do all the hard work and then a guy jumps in front of you and says, oh, look at my bill. I remember with Pat Schroeder with the family medical leave bill, and
Mhm.
she pushed that for decades. And then Senator Dodd, who was chair of, I think at that point, the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, thought, oh, that's a good bill. And so it's known as the Dodd bill.
Right. So just for folks who may not know those names, Pat Schroeder was a member of Congress from Colorado. Chris Dodd was a U.S. Senator from Connecticut, but we're talking about federal legislation here.
Right,
So
right.
you talked about stepping forward. So in 1993, you decided to run for governor in the 1994 election. Talk about what made you decide to run and what you liked best or least about that campaign.
Well, one of the reasons I decided to run, and again, this will be history, one of my colleagues in the House, John Arnick, was appointed by Governor Schaefer to be a judge.
Yep.
And as the Senate Executive Nominations Committee was considering his appointment, and it was considered a shoo-in, everybody in Annapolis liked him, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
Um, One of the women that I had worked with on a number of pieces of legislation, including one in the Senate judicial proceedings and the House Judiciary Committee,
Mhm.
was extra protections for battered women. And Arnick had tried to stop it. And at any rate, this woman came forward sending a letter describing sexual harassment by Arnick.
Right.
And I actually remembered as we were doing a joint committee at the very end of the session, she and a woman who worked for Governor Schaefer looked up at me and they said, "How do you stand it here?" And I thought, oh no,
Wow.
but I didn't think a lot of it. Well, that was, they had gone out to dinner and Arnick had his hands all over the woman who worked for the governor, who happened to be blonde and very quite attractive, also very smart and hardworking
Mhm.
and diligent.
Right.
Um, and so at any rate, I became kind of inadvertently one of the leaders in trying to stop his appointment
Mm,
and got a huge amount of blowback from my Senate colleagues. I mean, really rude, obnoxious, ignorant
right.
comments.
Man,
Um,
that's what a difference a couple decades make. Because
yeah,
just to remind folks who aren't sort of insiders who are as old as I am on this, but that was the beginning of the end of Patty Scher's legislative career and that was the beginning of Chris Van Hollen's journey because he was in the House. Patty Scher had embraced John Arnick to be judge, and uh, there was a photo of her, and Chris used that. He was a delegate. He was challenging her in the primary, Democratic primary for Senate, and nobody thought he had a chance. And I knew she was going down. And Chris went from the Senate and then to Congress and now to the US Senate. So that was the very beginning of his journey.
and so one of the things I decided, and I had actually, in watching a lot of women elected officials at that time, I think it's changed. There are a lot more younger women,
Mhm.
um, but in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, women tended to be much older. They waited till they had raised their kids, were community activists, but they'd run for office and then be so excited that they won that they would never try to move up.
Right.
And I made a commitment that A, it wasn't going to be my life, and B, that I thought it was really important for women to move into larger, more important political positions.
Right.
And with the Arnick incident, what I realized was I could stay in the Senate for a long time.
Hmm.
I felt like I was doing a good job. My constituents appreciated me. But that if I really wanted to make a difference in Maryland for everybody, not just women, um, I needed to be governor. And not very many women were running for governor.
Right.
Um, and in Maryland, because the governor really controls the budget, it's the most powerful governorship in the
In the
country.
country.
Um,
Mhm.
and so I decided to take a chance.
And talk
It's
about,
hard.
sure.
Women are accepted now as advocates, as legislators, but when it comes to executive positions,
Mhm.
there's an extra burden.
Mhm.
Ooh, can you handle it? I
Right.
mean, they're just kind of assumed that they can do it.
Mhm.
Women, it's questionable.
Sure.
Um,
Kamala
so I think
Harris.
that was probably my biggest frustration.
Sure. What did you like best about running for governor?
Going all around the state, I had spent a lot of time in the legislature trying to get to know the rest of the state. I think it's really important to know where your colleagues come from,
Mhm.
what their interests are, why they vote and advocate for issues that they do,
Mhm.
because it helps you talk to them and communicate with them and maybe explain to them in a way that's meaningful why I'm pushing for
Mhm.
particular pieces of legislation or policy changes.
That's great.
But when I was running, obviously, I went around the state even more.
Right. So fast forward just a smidge, you chose a woman as your running mate, Barbara
Yeah,
Kramer,
yeah,
from Harford County, if I remember
yeah.
correctly, and a delegate. Tell me what sort of pushback you got and about that, because that's historic.
It was actually the first female team.
Mhm.
Again, when we first started talking, my, kitchen cabinet inner circle,
Yep,
automatically it was, what male are you going to choose
right.
to quote balance the ticket? And I remember my campaign manager saying, well, now wait a minute, we ought to look at women.
Mhm.
Barbara and I had worked on a number of issues together. I respected her. She was smart. She was hardworking. Um, and so I decided to ask her to be my running mate. Obviously, there was pushback. I mean, whenever you do something that nobody else has ever done, um, there's pushback. I don't think in the long run that it made that much difference um, in whether I won or lost. But I didn't do it to quote make history. I didn't run to make history. Um, I did it really to kind of change the way people look at who can be governor. And had I won, I think I would have changed the state significantly.
Right. Well, let's fast forward to your current life. We were
Mhm.
very sad when you left Maryland because you were such an amazing leader and activist. And you decided to move to California with your wonderful David and your kids, Kathleen and Patrick, and as a grandma, and you get to spend time with family. What was the transition like? Politics in California, pretty different than politics in Maryland. What do you miss and what do you enjoy being out there working in politics?
Because my kids were here, my mom and my sister are in San Diego. We had and David and I were retired for a number of years.
Mhm.
He gets annoyed when I say he retired early, but he retired at the age of 56 after 30 years in federal government service. Um,
56 is really young.
I think so too. But he had planned. He always wanted to.
Good for him.
Um, he, felt, and it's turned out to be true. It's much nicer to be retired when you're younger,
Yes.
so you have the energy. We've done a lot of world traveling, gotten to see friends all around the country. Um, but as a result, we had spent a lot of time in California.
Mhm.
And actually kind of thought we would split our time between San Diego and DC. But our daughter went to Berkeley Law School and settled in the Bay Area in Oakland, and 11 years ago had a daughter. We didn't want to be 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Our son and his wife live in LA, so it seemed to make sense.
Yep. But you've been
Oakland is
involved in congressional campaigns out there and presidential
no,
campaigns.
I really initially made the decision. I would, participate in the community. I was a leader in our neighborhood organization. I started working with the Oakland Police Department.
Mhm.
They have community safety representatives, trying to do something with the department to improve safety, but do it in the right way. Um, but I really avoided politics until Hillary ran for president. So in 2015, 2016, I had been a Hillary delegate back in 2008
Huh?
and had coordinated her campaign in Montgomery County.
For the record,
Um,
2008, when we shared a hotel room in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and knocked on doors for her out in Iowa in the bitter, bitter cold with
Along with
Nancy
Nancy Floreen
Fleury. I
from
know,
the
Councilmember
County
Nancy Fleury.
Council. Yes,
That was
yes. I
fun,
got
but
hit
cold.
in the head when a door almost knocked me down the stairs when the wind flew it right into my face. Yes, yes, that was something.
That was,
Um, so really in 2016 is when I decided to get involved in electoral politics in
yes.
California, and met some just fabulous people. The Bay Area has, I mean, I thought Montgomery County was an area of activism and progressive values. The Bay Area is like on
All that on steroids.
super, yeah, yeah, super speed. people are very liberal.
Yeah.
I'm actually considered now a moderate to a
Right.
conservative.
So,
Um, but they're really dedicated, hardworking, work all over the country. And with them in 2017, I got involved in a congressional race in the Central Valley, which is the area where Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta started the farm workers movement.
mhm.
And to this day, the farm workers are still horribly exploited, intimidated.
And
Um,
so vulnerable to COVID.
Yes, yes, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And the big agriculture owners don't give them any masks, any protective equipment.
Yeah.
If they don't show up at work, they don't get any money. The death rate, the only two people I know that have died of COVID all lived in that area.
Mm,
Neither of them were farm workers, but it spreads.
yeah.
One person has it, and a lot of people aren't careful. Some
Yep.
of the local sheriffs won't enforce the statewide mask mandates or the social distancing.
Right.
Um, it's really an area that badly needs good representation.
Right.
So we
So
won in 2018 and lost in 2020, unfortunately.
live to fight another day. And we're
Right,
glad that you're out
right.
there continuing to make a difference and bring all of your leadership experience. But it is time, Mary Borgers, to pivot to our fast five.
Oh
So
dear.
the five questions here. So first, tell me who some of your sheroes have been over the years. Which women have you most admired, in
Um,
or not?
Yeah, no, I mean there were so many that you know came before, so to speak. I guess in Maryland, Barbara Mikulski, who broke ground.
Yep,
Um, Certainly, wow, this is not going to be fast, I'm afraid.
that's all right. Well, let's just stick with
Sure.
Barbara Mikulski and go to a second
Okay.
one. Um, what are you most proud of in your whole career? What accomplishment are you most proud of?
Well, when I was lobbying for women's rights, um, I noticed that it was all male judges deciding how these new laws would be interpreted. And so I went out of my way to try to mentor women, encourage them to put their names in, that they, um, we needed more women on the bench to have more diversity and different interpretations of the laws. And I got the Women's Caucus to make that one of their priorities, recognizing that, maybe we pass good laws, but if they're not interpreted fairly,
Right.
then a lot of what we wanted to accomplish doesn't occur.
That's fantastic. Good for you. So, question number three. What is a food that you absolutely could not do without? You would hate to give up.
Well, I've had to give up crabs. I have to tell you, crab cakes in California are all bread. They're not
Wow.
good at all. And lobster, when I grew up in Connecticut, was my favorite food. Um, Ice cream, I think.
Okay. Well, you'll have to come back east more often. We'll take you out for crabs. You've already referenced that you and David have done a ton of world travel. When it's safe to do so, where's a place you'd like to go?
We want to go to Japan. We were on our way to start planning. We're probably not going to travel as much. We have a friend that I actually met on a legislative exchange program who's a pediatrician in Berlin.
Mhm.
And in 2018, we spent about 6 weeks with him and used it as a base to go up to the Baltic states and to Prague and to Venice. We'd like to do that again.
Uh-huh.
And I have a nephew who lives in London, so I would like to visit there again. And actually, I would love to take at least my 11-year-old granddaughter,
Uh-huh.
um, but I'm not sure we can keep up with her at this point.
Right, 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 right. And the last question, the only one that I ask everyone, former Senator Mary Boergers, what is your secret talent? What is your superpower or skill that you can do that most folks can't?
Well, I don't know that I would say most folks can't, but what I've learned over time is I'm a really good organizer
Nice.
and I'm a good conduit of getting people together,
Uh-huh.
and figuring out interconnections so that we can make change and improve life by getting all the right people to be pulling in the same direction.
That's fabulous. Well, that's something we need today. And hopefully Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will continue great
My
successes.
former senator
I know. My vice president.
and my daughter works for the Attorney General's office. So her first Attorney General was Kamala, who then went to the Senate and now Vice President. Her current one is Xavier Becerra,
Is
who
succeeding.
will be Health and Human Services. So
Great. Well, Mary Borgers, thank you so much for taking the time for this kibitz. It was such a treat to catch up with you and hear some of your stories. So please stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime when you come east again.
oh, I sure hope so. That's one of the commitments David and I have made is as rather than doing international travel, as soon as we think it's safe, we're going to definitely come back to Montgomery County, but also try to see friends and family around the country.
Good, good. Well, we look forward to that being sooner rather than later.
Great.
Take
Hope
care.
so.
Thank you so much, Mary. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.